If a city tells you you can protest, but you have to pay for additional security while you do it, that sounds reasonable on its face. It's also, in many cases, unconstitutional. And that's the issue emerging right now in Lebanon, Pennsylvania. Hi, I'm Nate Charles, and welcome back to the Rule of Law Brief. From what's been communicated publicly, the city, under Mayor Capello, with input from Chief Sims, is taking the position that while it may cover certain safety measures for now, protest organizers could be required to pay for those measures in the future. The third iteration of the No Kings rallies is going to be held tomorrow, March 28th, 2026, at Veterans Memorial Park in Lebanon, Pennsylvania. And from what's been communicated publicly, the city is taking the position that while it may cover certain safety measures for now, in the future, protest organizers could be required to pay for those measures. And let me be clear at the outset. I'm not assuming bad intent here. I know Mayor Capello a little bit. I know Chief Sims just a little bit less, but I don't think they are trying to deliberately suppress speech in this instance. It looks like the city is trying to manage legitimate safety concerns. Traffic, crowd control, the risk of vehicles entering pedestrian areas, those issues are real and they deserve serious attention. But I am going to use this as a teachable moment. The Constitution draws a line here, and it's a line that's very easy to cross if you're not careful. The U.S. Supreme Court addressed this exact problem in a case called Forsyth County v. Nationalist Movement, and the rule from that case is straightforward. The government cannot impose costs on speech based on anticipated risks, controversy, or public reaction. In other words, the government cannot say, we think your protest might require more security, so you have to pay more to hold it. That's unconstitutional. Because once the cost of speaking depends on how people are expected to react to it, you've created a system where the more controversial your message is, the more security the government claims it needs, and the more you have to pay to speak. And that's exactly what the First Amendment prohibits. Now, to be precise, and this matters, the government can charge certain fees. Going back to Cox v. New Hampshire, the U.S. Supreme Court has stated that local and state governments can charge permitting fees, can impose content-neutral administrative costs, and regulate the time, place, and manner of protests. So the issue is not whether Lebanon can charge any fee, because it can. The issue is what kind of fee. And here's where the concern comes in, especially with regard to the No Kings rallies. The types of costs being discussed, things like physical barriers, traffic control measures, or additional police presence, are not flat administrative fees. They are risk-based measures. They are anticipated because the city has made a judgment about the potential danger associated with a particular type of event. And that means that the cost is discretionary, variable, and tied to perceived risk. And that is exactly the type of system that the U.S. Supreme Court has struck down. Because even if the city's motive is entirely legitimate, even if this is purely about safety, the Constitution still does not allow governments to shift those risk-based costs onto the speakers. Intent doesn't fix the problem. Structure does. And structurally, once you say this event requires additional safety measures and the organizers may have to pay for them, you've tied the cost of speech to the government's assessment of risk. That's a constitutional issue. Now, to be fair to Mayor Capello and Chief Sims, they absolutely have the authority to take safety precautions. They can install barriers. They can manage traffic. They can deploy law enforcement resources in order to manage crowds and to manage counter-protests. None of that is in question. But here's the principle that governs all of this. The government can manage risk, but it cannot charge speakers for risk that arises from the act of speaking. Because if it could, then the right to protest would quietly become conditional. Not conditional based on the law, but on your ability to afford whatever level of security the government decides your speech requires. And over time, that leads to a predictable result. Low risk, low controversy speech remains easy and cheap. Everything else becomes expensive, or effectively impossible. And that is not a content-neutral system. That is a system that suppresses speech indirectly through costs. And that's one of many government acts that the First Amendment is designed to prevent. So again, I want to be clear. This is not about bad faith. The city of Lebanon is trying to do best by everybody involved. We get that. But this is about a constitutional boundary. And if Lebanon follows through on requiring protest organizers to pay for these kinds of risk-based safety measures, it will be overstepping that line.